Thank you for coming today. My name is Rianne Gasper, and I am running as the BC Conservative candidate for the Abbotsford Mission riding. Before introducing John, I would like to thank Jared DeYoung and his entire family for welcoming us today on their beautiful Rosegate Dairy Farm. Now it is my great pleasure to stand before you and introduce to you a man who has been fighting for British Columbians for over 2 decades, John Rustad.
Thanks very much. I was worried there I was going to have the same problem EB did with a wasp just came and tried to land on me. First of all, thanks everybody for being out today. As we know, agriculture is a critical component of what we need to be doing in British Columbia. Across this province for far too long, our ag sector has really struggled. Since 2014, for example, we've lost close to 10% of the workforce in our agricultural sector. That's equivalent of losing 2,500 jobs across BC since 2014. And what I hear from farmers from all corners of the province is they're struggling to make ends meet. The cost structure is just too high. We are the highest cost producers anywhere in Canada, if not in North America. Our farming sector knows what to do in order to be able to expand the opportunities that we have in British Columbia, but unfortunately they're just being held back by many things, including government, of course. Across British Columbia today, we have about 26,000 farms operating on about 2.6 million hectares. That's part, of course, of our agricultural land reserve. But also the sad reality of all of that is the younger people entering into this sector is diminishing in this province. Matter of fact, we're actually losing younger people from the sector at a faster rate than any other province in the country. As we know, of course, if youth are not coming into the sector, what does that mean about our sector going forward down the road? And a big part of that, of course, is youth being able to look at it and say, how can I make a living at it? How can I make sure I support family? And be able to see multi-generation happening on farms as we see in so many farms today across this province. Our forest sector also produces about 150 different commodities in British Columbia. Our forest sector, agricultural sector, I should say. Our agriculture sector, when you look at all those types of products that are being produced, it's really quite remarkable. British Columbia is one of the best climates we have in the country for growing food products. We can grow so many different things in this great province that we have. But as I said, a couple of things that definitely need to be done. First of all, we need to drive down the costs. We need to make sure water is available. We need to work with the agriculture sector, with farmers, because they do know how to improve the situation. They do know how to improve agricultural production. One of the most important pieces that we have in British Columbia when it comes to the agricultural land is our agricultural land reserve. That was first set up in the 1970s. However, when it was set up, we took away the private property rights of individuals, and in return, we had a commitment that the land would be protected for agriculture and that government would be able to provide a benefit to those landowners for the loss of those private property rights. What we've seen, unfortunately, since then over the decades is that has continually eroded. The commitment between government and our agricultural sector is not as strong as it needs to be. We need to figure out how we actually renew that commitment between government and our agricultural sector, particularly on the agricultural land reserve, so that we see the benefits of people having that land locked in, and we recognize as well the loss of those rights by having people committing that land to meeting our agricultural future. So that's a huge commitment by us as a province, is to review the ALR, review that commitment, and make sure we're doing everything we can to support our ag sector. A big part of that, of course, is reducing our cost structure in British Columbia, and that is one way that we can help with that. In order to support farmers, of course, there's lots of changing technology that's out there, whether it is people investing in things like vertical farming or using new technologies on the ground. And so we want to make sure that we invest in the research and development that's needed for ag sector, supporting the ag sector so that we can make sure that we've got crops that are resilient to our changing climate, as well as looking at the best practices and providing those supports for our ag sector to be able to adapt to them. We want to make sure that we provide financial support for yield increasing measures, both conventional types of utilization of fertilizer, the way it's being used, as well as other practices such as crop rotation, organic farming, and these types of components are things that I think are going to be important that we need to be able to continue on with our ag sector in British Columbia. We want to make sure as well that we increase access to advanced agricultural technologies. As I said, many things around the world are changing around our ag sector. And just to give you a thought, since the 1970s, the ag sector has gone through a huge revolution in terms of the technology, the advancement, the better utilization of our farmland, the better utilization of water, various crops. We want to be able to continue with that, and as a province, we need to make sure that we're doing everything we can to be able to help with our ag sector being able to do that. But of course, we do have changing climate in British Columbia. We've had many events here, whether it's floods or whether it's heat or whether it's several cold winters that have had a huge impact, particularly on our fruit growers, but on many of our agricultural sector. We want to make sure that government is there to be able to support the ag sector through these things and make sure that we provide the support and funding for replanting. We need to be able to improve the various tools that government has in place. Instead of it being these tools which are designed to meet some government target, we want to make sure the tools are there and available to meet what's needed in the agricultural sector. And of course, for many things such as the fruit growers, whether it's the berry crops, etc., making sure that we have a very strong pollinators is important. Our bee populations are important in this province. We need to make sure that we do everything we can to support and enhance the bees that we need, the pollinators that we need, but also looking for being able to bring bees into this country. And for whatever reason, some of the berry growers were telling me that they're not allowed to bring bees in from the United States. Even though bees are flying across the border and pollinating here, for whatever reason, we're not allowed to bring the bees into BC. That doesn't make any sense. So we're going to make sure that what we're doing in British Columbia is doing what's right for British Columbians to be able to support our ag sector. A big piece of this, of course, through all of this is the fact that in British Columbia, we only procure about 1/3 of the food we consume from BC. 2/3 of the food that we consume as a province comes from outside our borders. And this is the whole reason we're talking about doing this, supporting our farmers and reducing the cost structure, is we need to take care of that problem. We are left vulnerable as a province if we do not provide the food that we need for our people in British Columbia. And that's why our target is to double food production in British Columbia. So these programs that we talked about here are about helping the farmer do that, but there's more that we need to do as well. So in particular, we want to make sure that there's access of our food to our local markets. And so we want to expand the Buy BC program. We want to make sure that there are no barriers from government, whether it's through the Agricultural Land Commission or other things, for farmers to be able to actually get the food out to our local markets, making sure that people can purchase our good grown, our BC product, our healthy products that we grow here in British Columbia. And so increasing local food capacity and processing is going to be an important piece of that. Right now in British Columbia, because of rules of the Agricultural Land Commission, we are limiting how much we can do in terms of processing and packaging with British Columbia. We need to do what's right for people, for the farmers in British Columbia, so we're going to make sure we make those changes. There's another thing, though, that just drives me crazy, and I was part of a farm assessment review panel that took place back in, I think it was around 2008. Part of that group actually looked at the value-added products that we can do. And it's crazy in British Columbia that you can grow berries, and that contributes towards your farm status in terms of value for money. But if you take those berries and you turn it into jam, and you sell the jam, that's not considered an agricultural product. And so you lose your farm status. And for many ways, we're actually creating disincentives to be able to add value to the products that we grow in British Columbia. So these are the things that need to be able to change. We also want to make sure that we invest in infrastructure, making sure that our roads are in good shape and farmers have the ability to be able to move their equipment around and to be able to open up also additional farming opportunities. And for some products, certainly we produce way more than we need to consume in British Columbia. So for example, we produce a lot more berries than we consume. We produce calves. We produce a lot of seafood, various products. We want to make sure that we expand our markets to help with the profitability of that for export. But all of this is from a perspective of making sure that we achieve food security here in British Columbia for the people in this province. To help and really reduce the cost structure in British Columbia on our agriculture sector, there's many things that we do need to do. One of the key pieces is the scrapping the carbon tax and the low carbon fuel emission standards. Agriculture tends to be very labor intensive, but also uses a lot of fuel in the works that they do. We want to make sure that we do everything we can to reduce those energy costs for people. So scrapping the carbon tax and the low carbon fuel emission standards means dropping the fuel costs by between 35 and 36 cents a litre, which will be a huge piece of helping out with the agriculture sector meeting what's needed. We want to make sure that we launch additional land access initiatives. So there's opportunities for small farmers to be able to access land, whether it's bringing new land into production or land that might be existing. We also want to establish a micro loan program. And the intent of this is to be able to make sure that farmers have the opportunity to access the capital they need to be able to do that growth of productivity and that production that we want. And of course, the big one which is needed in every sector in this province is cutting red tape. There's a tremendous amount of red tape and barriers that's in place in every sector, and agriculture is no different. So we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to do that. Of course, you cannot grow food if you do not have water. Water is a critical component to being able to have a successful agriculture industry, whether it's in the Lower Mainland or anywhere else across the province. So we are going to make sure that we do investments in our water management. That means investing in flood mitigation and infrastructure that's needed for areas like this throughout the valley, expanding in water storage and capacity for farms around the province, making sure that we invest in research for our aquifers and our surface water, knowing that relationship and making sure that we do everything we can to make water available for our agricultural sector, not only to be able to grow and prosper, but also to make sure that we're meeting our needs and the needs of wildlife as well. Understanding that is the best way to go as opposed to the precautionary measure, which is the approach that this government is taking. That, to me, is not the right approach. We should be able to invest and understand our water and make sure that we can manage it. But also that means looking at making sure that we protect the agricultural water rights in legislation. We need to make sure that we do not have unintended consequences of other legislation that erode the ability for farmers to be able to have that access to water to be able to carry on with their production. As I mentioned, we're going to get rid of red tape. Another big piece of that is also looking at the Agricultural Land Commission itself. There are many rules that are in the Agricultural Land Commission, which seems more about protecting land than it does actually about supporting farmers and supporting agricultural products. So once again, we're going to make sure that everything we do is about increasing our food productivity and making sure that we have the rules and the components in place to be able to achieve that. All of this put together is a big step that I think we need to do in British Columbia to help with our food security, to help with our food production, and to make sure that we have the ability to support people in this province. As we all know, our climate is changing. With changing climate and with changing government policies in other jurisdictions, we may see a reduction in food supply worldwide. For example, some governments want to reduce the use of things like nitrogen-based fertilizer. 40% of the world's food supply comes from using nitrogen-based fertilizer. So if we see these types of reductions in food production, British Columbia is not necessarily going to be the first place people are going to be sending food to. That leaves us at risk, which is why we're doing all these policies. We want to make sure that we are looking after our own people in this province. We produce some of the best products you could ever want for food to be able to meet our population. So I think it's government's turn now to step up to the plate, support our agricultural sector, and make sure that we're looking after the people in this province. So with that, thank you for coming out. And at this time now, I'd like to invite Jared to come up and say a few words. And once again, thank you very much for opening up his farm here today and the dairy production here today for us to be able to do this announcement.
And yeah, hopefully we'll be here for more generations.